You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It is season 3. It's episode 22, halfway through the Cubs spring training. Don't forget, listen, download, review. Most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow on the socials, Fly the W670, Twitter, Instagram. Of course, we're on Facebook. Email Crawly and I, flythew670 at gmail.com. All right, Crawly, we are getting closer and closer, and you are going to get up close and personal in about 24 hours.
Yeah, I am literally sitting here right now, and the second we're done with this, I am closing the laptop and heading to O'Hare Field. So can't get any closer. And for all my peeps out in Arizona, get ready for Hurricane Crawly because it's coming.
Hurricane. Is that the same kind of Crawly we see at CubsCon, or is this a little different version?
Oh no, and this is a pumped up, energized version, man. Energizer Bunny. It's going to be 4 games in 4 days is what we're doing.
All right, beautiful, very, very cool. All right, so we are about at the midway point of spring training. It's only one game has been played, and that was on Tuesday night since you and I have last gotten together.
Yeah, Tuesday we got the veterans finally got to play a night game, right? Because the previous 2 night games were mostly like all prospects. Dustin, I thought the lineup was interesting because one, David Peralta made his Cubs debut, and a little twist from Craig Counsell, Seiya Suzuki played left field and Mike Tauchman played right field. So I
like that. I like that. Very interesting, especially if Ian Happ is going to be a little bit delayed, but he has been doing some batting practice, so that's good news.
Yeah, and more good news, Justin Steele on the mound looked fantastic. He went 4 innings, gave up 4 hits, 2 runs. Although, honestly, Dustin, I don't feel like one of them should have been earned, but that's just the scorekeeping out there sometimes a little funky. Anyway.
Well, they're in spring training too, Crawly, right? That's
what
I've heard. I've heard the official scorers are also part of spring training.
It was weird, but no walks. Dustin, how about this? 9 Ks, Dustin, in 4 innings. So that'll
most in spring training this year.
Absolutely. In the first, he gives up a leadoff double, but then he strikes out Wilson Contreras, Christian Yelich, and Rhys Hoskins. So, Dustin, Milwaukee was going with their lineup just as it pretty much would look. And that would, strike out those 3 guys. That's pretty impressive. He's then going to strike out another 2 batters in the second, 2 more in the third. But in the 3rd inning, Bryce Turang led off with a single. He stole second and scored on a William Contreras double. Willie had himself a heck of a game. Steele got 2 more strikeouts in the 4th. He comes out in the 5th and he gives up a leadoff single to Brewers Uber prospect Jackson Chourio. And if you know anything about Jackson Chourio, he's a 5-tool player, very fast. And so the ball was hit to Morel, and I thought he let the ball play him instead of charging the ball. And Chourio's really fast. So then, Morel tries to make up for it by gunning the ball, and that resulted in an error. So Steele's day was done. He went 4 innings, gave up 4 hits, 2 runs, 9 Ks, but one of those runs came after Merriweather came into the game. But that's the kind of start you want to see from Justin Steele.
Yep, he looked like a really nice tune-up for your season opener.
He featured all the pitches. It looked like he just looked really good. And like I said, going into the 5th inning, he's building up that arm strength. So Julian Merriweather came in with 1 on and 1 out. He got a line out. He walked a batter, had a strikeout. So he got 2 outs, but then he hung a meatball to William Contreras that was blasted to left field for a 3-run homer. Those were the first runs given up by Merriweather all spring. And that's going to happen. I don't know if it was maybe, because of being at night, maybe the pitch reacted differently, but that was one that was just literally on a tee for Contreras.
Get him out of the way now, right?
Yeah, get the bad ones out. The Cubs offense were able to come back in the bottom of the inning thanks to some bad defense by the Brewers and some wildness by Abner Uribe of Milwaukee. He hits the first batter he faced, Michael Busch, got Nico to ground out, but then David Peralta, first game, he hits a ball to right field and Garrett Mitchell fell down, allowing Peralta to reach third and score Busch. I thought it would have been a double either way, but he scored a triple. Yan Gomes hits a single to drive him in and advance on an error by Willie Adames. And then Tauchman would reach on a goofy infield single where it looked like they were going to double off Yan. He kind of got back to the base, and it caused Adames to drop the ball. He thought it should have been called interference. It wasn't. And so Seiya was hit by a pitch, second hit by a pitch in the inning, and that loaded the bases for Cody Bellinger. Cody hit one that went off Rhys Hoskins' glove to score 2 runs. I thought it should have been scored an error. It was scored a single. Game's tied either way, but Dustin, Rhys Hoskins, everyone knows he can hit, but the defense is suspect, and we saw it on that play there.
And that's probably one of the bigger reasons why he's up north of the Cheddar Curtain and not over at Clark and Addison.
Absolutely. Jose Quas came in the top of the sixth, loaded the bases with 2 outs. Jose Ortiz had to hit an infield single to Morel. Maybe he should have gone home. It was a tough play, but 1 run scored to put the Brewers up 5-4. So that was the first run Quas has given up this spring. So Merriweather and Quas were perfect until this game. The Cubs once again tied it up in the bottom of the inning. David Peralta again, double, and Yan Gomes with a single to make it 5-5. That is, Dustin, where it stood until the 9th inning when Patrick Wisdom, who's missed a whole bunch of games with a quad injury, hit a 1-out walk-off home run. Cubs fly the W, 6-5 victory. I don't care if it's spring training. Walk-off home runs are always fun.
Very cool. Good guy. Loving the he's kind of gotten the hockey player hair going now, Jan, does Patrick Wisdom.
Yeah, a little party. What was it? Business in the front, party at the back. A little
kind of
mullety looking.
Kind of surfer, mullety kind of a thing.
I'm looking at it, and it was good. But Dustin, you mentioned earlier, the Cubs have played 19 games so far this spring. Another 15 to go before heading for Texas for opening day. We've had 2 rounds of cuts, and we thought we would look at some of the questions that we had about the 2024 Cubs before spring training started and see where we kind of stand on these. Right now, Dustin, I feel like when we talked about first base, I think we both kind of agreed that Michael Busch would be the guy that's going to be given the first shot. You agree with that?
Yep. And, so far so good, not perfect, but definitely not awful.
No, he's slashing 200, 367, 583. He's got the power. We've seen the home runs, right? We've seen, him driving in runs. The defense is okay. It's not great, but I would say average is where I would put it. We talked about Patrick Wisdom being kind of the platoon player with that. I'm just surprised. I feel like Matt Mervis has really kind of been knocked down a couple pegs, in my opinion.
Oh, without a doubt.
And, you're taking a look. The Cubs are playing right now, and Miguel Amaya had a home run, but Dom Smith hit a home run as well. And I just haven't seen Matt Mervis a lot. And when I have, I don't think he's really kind of turned heads like he's needed to. So
yeah, it started out at the beginning of spring training, like the first 5 or 6 games, it was like all Matt Mervis all the time.
Right. And I think there was a little injury to just a minor injury to Busch at the time, but it didn't really keep him out long. And then since he's been in there, they've been giving him every opportunity. So I kind of feel like that's the way they're going. Center field, Dustin, was something we were not sure about, and that was answered when Cody Bellinger got the job in PCA. Has now been optioned to minor league camp. He started today in center field on Wednesday. But Cody Bellinger to me looks like he's picking up where he left off, and I know it's not fair because he's only been a couple games. But just looking at his at bats and his approach and how he looks in center field. I mean, I understand why the Cubs did what they did. They had to replace that offense and give PCA a little bit more time to get some more work in at AAA.
Yeah, that's the way it's got to be. But he will be back up. I don't doubt that.
But let me, Dustin, I talked with Jim Callis the other last episode. And when we were talking, one thing he said, he's like, I want to, give a shout out to PCA because the way with this new spring breakout game, which is happening on Friday, goes anyone on the 40-man roster has the option of playing or not playing. So after PCA, got, knocked back into minor league camp, he could have said, no, I don't want to play the spring breakout game. He instantly wanted on that lineup. He wants to showcase himself. And so I think that's a really good sign from PCA. He's not going down there and pouting or anything like that. For those that don't know, can you explain that game pretty quick for us, Crawly? Yeah, the spring breakout is going to be on Friday. They are going to have it's just basically the best prospects from the Cubs and the best prospect from the White Sox. So there's no veterans. So this is going to be at Sloan Park. There's going to be another game going on, an away game, I think at Kansas City. I'm not positive. But what they're going to do is you're going to see guys like Cade Horton is expected to pitch in that game. Cole Franklin. Some of the guys you saw up, Matt Shaw being there, Brennan Davis, Owen Casey, a lot of the guys that you did see in camp, but this is going to be in Cactus League and it's going to be in the Grapefruit League. So this whole weekend is going to be a whole set of some of the best players in the entire game are all playing on the weekend. So it's a great chance for fans, maybe like fans that are a little bit more casual than me, to get a chance to see these young guys that we've been highlighting and talking to and have been on our podcast.
Now, is that a game that they're going to show on Marquee?
Yes, that will be on Marquee, and Jim Callis, who was on last week, is going to be on the call.
Part of the broadcast? Very cool.
It's going to be the Road to Wrigley broadcast, so it's going to be the thriesome. It's going to be Lance Brozdowski, Elise Menaker, and Jim Callis. So that, to me, is going to be probably the highlight of spring training, and I encourage anybody that missed the last episode to go back to it, because Jim explained how that all kind of came to be. And also there's other things they're thinking in the future. Maybe this is going to be like a tournament and somebody can get an extra pick at the draft if they win, both in the Cactus League and in the Grapefruit League. Not saying that's going to happen, but that's kind of like the thinking, that to just see how this works. Because there's obviously logistical issues that come with something like this. But how cool would that be if there was like a March Madness style tournament?
Yeah, I like it. I think it's fun. And I like that you're having the game against your crosstown rival. That makes it more fun too.
Absolutely. But the thing is that the Brewers have one of the best farm systems. They're right behind the Cubs. They were ranked 3. The Cubs were 2. Could you imagine, say, if the Cubs beat the White Sox and then they got to play the Brewers, who are a very young, talented team as well? I mean, that to me would just be exciting to kind of keep seeing it going and see how far they would advance.
Yeah, I like that idea too. Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing we did talk about was third base, and true to his word, Craig Counsell has given Christopher Morel, a lot of playing time there. I'm going to tell you, Dustin, I am a little bit more nervous than I was before the season began. I feel like, especially I think he kind of, obviously this is, he said he feels most comfortable playing third, but it just doesn't look like that to me when I watch him. Like, he's not sure wherever the shortstop is positioned behind him. So if I am Craig Counsell, I would say when Dansby's in there, don't dive for any balls, Chris. Just let Dansby try to get him. Don't even do that. But just especially the easy plays. Sometimes I feel like Chris does well with the harder plays where he doesn't have time to think. And when they're kind of more the routine plays, I feel like those are the ones that he really struggles with.
Yeah, thinking maybe too hard. I mean, there's a lot of pressure, right? There's a lot of pressure there.
Right. And I people are like, oh, it's just easy. Put Morel there. And I wonder if they're kind of seeing just certain things I see from the throws, the angles he takes, like I said, recognizing where the infield is behind him. I'm a little bit more nervous. Now Nick Madrigal, and Patrick Wisdom could be an option. Wisdom made a nice play last night, along with that home run at third base. He is Patrick's a good athlete, and I feel like, third base is more natural, but it's going to be very curious to see, you can't just have an error a game and two, people say, oh, look, 2 nice plays by Morel. That's great. That's awesome. But then there's always one bad play. And I just wonder how long that can keep up.
Yep. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, right now they don't really have a ton of choices. They don't really have a better option, right? Because you got to have his bat in the lineup.
Got to have his bat.
Now, that doesn't mean he can't. That doesn't mean he can't DH, but you got to have his bat in the lineup.
I'm very curious to me, okay, let's say it's a close game, because how especially April games in Chicago are, and the wind's blowing in, and those are usually low scoring games. We don't know what it's going to be like when it turns, maybe it's going to be 70s. It's 70 today, and we're in the middle of March. But, in those close games, I wonder at what point Craig says, okay, now I want Chris to DH, and we're going to have maybe Wisdom at third. I wonder how if the Cubs have a lead and it's close, how much leash he's going to give him.
Right. But I mean, Madrigal's probably the guy, right? It wouldn't be Wisdom. You'd probably go Madrigal for that defensive replacement, I'm thinking.
I would say either one of those guys right now.
I mean, both are probably a step up, but
it could be Madrigal.
You may have Patrick again, as we're going through this, Crawly, and maybe we're going to get there. But I don't think we are. It's not on the list I see. Who's DHing? It's an everyday position. Right? It's supposed to be a big time thing, and we don't talk about it. I'm not saying we're to blame that we're not talking about it, but nobody seems to talk about it. I barely even hear these 5 guys, these 3 guys, these 2 guys. It's like Nick Madrigal opening day based on a matchup could be the Cubs DH. To me, that's crazy.
I would say that all of a sudden things have gotten very interesting because of late signees to camp, guys that they've signed pretty late, or, are just coming back from injury. So Dom Smith has a home run in today's game.
Yeah.
Garrett Cooper has been hitting home runs.
Garrett Cooper does too. Yeah, he's got a home run today too.
And
Amaya, I mean, would you dare risk your catchers as your DHs when they're not catching?
I would have him rest, especially with Yan Gomes being older. I would have them rest on those days. But I think that the bench is going to be a lot more tricky to figure out than we originally thought. We said, okay, we know these guys. But to me, Garrett Cooper, Dom Smith, and David Peralta have made this now very interesting. And one of those three very much could be your opening day DH.
Very well could be. Very, very interesting. They're all interesting topics. All right, let's keep going. We got.
No, I mean that's fine because that was something we didn't know when spring started. That's why we're revisiting this. Is these guys that are coming there, they're turning some heads. And right. If all of a sudden these are non-roster invitees, minor league deals, like if they don't make it with the big league club, I got a feeling someone else may try to snatch a couple of these guys.
Well, and Canario's still up with the big league team, right? At the moment.
Yes, sir.
There's another option. I mean, and listen, Pat Wisdom might be the guy. I mean, who knows?
I think with the DH, a lot of that has to do with how deep your bench is, right? Mm-hmm. And so, who's going to be the DH depends on, do you have anyone that has any power that can play? And I think the Cubs do now way more than last year, that they have depth, not only in the DH department or even just in general, but also in the rotation, Dustin, where we've kind of seen, we talked about Justin Steele having a great start. I think Shota Imanaga is as advertised. I think we're going to see some strikeouts. I also think we're going to see some home runs he gives up. I think Kyle Hendricks looks Kyle Hendricks-esque. I'm just wondering how much the Jameson Taillon injury, he's not going to be ready on opening day. I wonder how much that's going to affect the rotation. I know they have guys, but it's not as simple as people are kind of making it out to be in some of the online discourse that I've seen on Twitter. I know Jordan Wicks right now looks like a lock. If there was a fifth starter spot, I think Jordan Wicks has earned that. But there's still questions, and now you need another pitcher to take care of Taillon's spot. And it's not, people say, oh, Ben Brown or this and that. Hayden Wesniewski. I don't know just yet, and there's nobody to me that's really jumped out and taken that just yet.
And Assad has just been okay, right?
Yeah, he's been okay, and I think they love him in that swing role.
Okay, right?
Yeah, just okay, but it's just people forget. If you remember, Dustin, in 2022 when Hayden Wesniewski made his debut, and we all were calling him Wes Nasty, and the guy was ridiculous. He made 7 starts, and he made 5 starts, 7 appearances. The guy looked out of this world to me. And then in spring training last year, he again looked dominant, and then the regular season came and he didn't. And so I'm not saying that's going to happen to Jordan Wicks or Ben Brown or anyone else, but it's just not as simple as when you talk about small sample size, 5 starts for Jordan Wicks last year or 6 starts and spring training this year. It doesn't mean it's going to necessarily translate into the regular season. I hope it does for the Cubs' sake, but I think that there's a lot of questions still going on as far as I think Jordan Wicks will be one of the pitchers for that 4-5 spot. Who else takes a spot while Taillon is out? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to see who steps up. Shameless plug. We've got Tommy Hotovy on tomorrow with the Mully and Haw Show, 9:25. Tommy will be back with us every other week. So looking forward to having Tommy on with Mully and Haw all season long.
Yeah, maybe he can give us some insight on what he's thinking, because I'm very curious as to what they're going to do. There's still 15 games to figure this out. But the time is going to fly. Dustin, the one thing that I am very confident about is I think the bullpen personally is going to be one of the strengths of this team. I think the depth, I think the guys that they're going to have coming up later are going to, just really improve this team. I am really excited to see. I think when I'm looking at this, I'm taking a look and I see, what Merriweather has done, what Alzolay has done. I thought Leiters looked good so far. All the guys we've needed to look good have looked really good. To me, Luke Little has just had a phenomenal camp. And this is going to be, I don't know if he's going to break camp, but I find it really hard for how the Cubs are going to be able to explain not having a left-hander who's throwing like he's throwing and, just being, not having a left-hander in the pen,
Yeah, that is something they will definitely have to address. It was kind of an issue last year as well, right? That was something that wasn't quite up to snuff, was the left-handed bullpen arm, right?
Right. And just in general, the Cubs bullpen was kind of middle of the road, 13th in ERA. But strikeouts, they weren't a big strikeout team. They didn't give up a lot of home runs, but they gave up a lot of walks, 24 walks per 9 innings. So that's got to go down. That has to go down. But I think it will. And I really, truly believe that in the story of the 2024 Cubs, I think, when you talk about the Brewers last year, the Brewers were awful on offense. The Brewers starting pitching was fantastic, but their bullpen was one of the best. And I have a feeling that is going to be, I think the Cubs offense is better than the Brewers last year, but I think that the relief pitching is going to be pretty close, and that's going to be a big part of the Cubs' success this year.
All right, we've mentioned a couple of the guys, but let's take a couple of shots at the bench. Miles Mastroboni, right? That he's probably making this team coming off the bench. Nick Madrigal probably making this team coming off the bench, and
that's the question. We talked about Patrick Wisdom. I mean, I think a guy that can play third and first and complement
in the corner outfielder spots if he had to, right?
Right, in a pinch. I think he's got a good shot. And again, one of the three new guys I think will probably make the roster. I think one of Cooper, Smith, or Peralta. Now, Peralta, I heard him last night. He was doing an interview, I think, with Lise Menaker last night, and he just really sounded like a pro and just said all the right things. And he's a guy that's one of those clutch guys. He reminds me a lot of like Craig Counsell back when Craig Counsell used to play, is that when the game is always on the line, like Peralta is one of those guys that just gets the hit that breaks your back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think Craig Counsell has some tough decisions coming up. I'm sure he's going to sit with Jed and Carter and talk about it. But hey, Dustin, this is a great problem to have, especially when it comes to the depth in position players and relief pitchers. I think this is going to really be I'm really looking forward to seeing what the final 26-man roster is going to look like.
I agree wholeheartedly. You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's episode 22 of season number 3. We're halfway through Cubs spring training. Don't forget to listen, download, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast and leave us a 5-star review. In this segment, we continue our tour of the NL Central as Crawly interviews Katie Woo, the Cardinals beat writer for The Athletic, to give our listeners, that's right, you, some insight into the moves that the Cardinals have made as they make their final push for, let's hope not, another National League Central title.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, I'm happy to have on Katie Woo. She covers the Cardinals for The Athletics as we continue our preview of the Cubs 2024 NL Central opponents. Katie, how are you doing so far this spring?
I am well. Feels like summer out in Florida. It's been pretty hot out here. But no, I'm well. I'm excited for a new season. The phrase "hope springs eternal" is very, very true in baseball land, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this Cardinals team does and what this division does. And in general, I feel like it could be a pretty tight one this year.
Well, Katie, you say hope springs eternal, and that's usually what Cub fans say because we usually don't have a good record. But last season for the Cardinals was not the greatest, to put it kindly. They finished 20 games under 500, good for last place in the NL Central. Katie, that was the first time since 1990 they finished in last place. I don't even want to, I didn't have my driver's license at the time. I don't even tell you how old I am. But that is just, to me, when I saw that stat, I had to look at it. 1990, that is unbelievable. And when I looked at it, the Cardinals were, first place. They won the division in 2022. What happened last season from what you saw that caused the Cardinals to go from first to last?
I think Adam Wainwright put it best last year. It was the perfect storm of badness. This Cardinals team got off to a really poor start in April, and it was almost like the organization didn't know how to lose, so they could never recover. It was a snowball starting from the beginning of the season to the end of April, and you can't win a division in April, but you can certainly lose one, and that's what felt like happened for the Cardinals last year. They just got off to a bad start and really couldn't rebound. And the problems for the Cardinals early on came with a lack of efficient starting pitching. Virtually no Cardinal starter except for Jordan Montgomery notched a quality start in April, and some shoddy outfield defense. And when you think about the Cardinals, the one thing that's constant for them is their stellar defense. So that defensive miscommunication, I think, came from having just too many outfielders and not enough playing time for anyone to really get into a rhythm or gel. And it just led to the ultimate collapse for the Cardinals, something that I think Cubs fans probably really enjoyed. But it was an unrecognizable product for most of that first half, just because this organization, from the players to the coaches to the front office, just didn't know how to lose.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about that start, March and April, the Cardinals went 10-19. And I know that there was a little bit of conflict between Oliver Marmol and Tyler O'Neill. And, I'm just wondering, once that kind of, played out, how was the vibe in the clubhouse between Oliver and the players?
So that's a great question. And I think it's fair because, we don't get to see what's going on as fans in the clubhouse. And honestly, minus with Tyler, there was no noticeable change. I think that particular scenario got really blown up because just managers don't do that anymore, especially so early in the season. I mean, the Cardinals had played 5 total games. I remember this because this game was my birthday, and I didn't get to go to my birthday dinner after because I was writing about this. It didn't really change the dynamic. What changed the dynamic in the clubhouse was, again, just not really understanding or comprehending how this team could be so bad. Certainly, Tyler felt called out and targeted, and I can understand that from a player's view 100%. But overall, showed up to the clubhouse the next couple of days, and I think Ollie and Tyler did their best to clear up their tension and move forward. One thing about Ollie Marmol, whether you agree or disagree with his managerial tactics, is he's consistently honest, and he clearly felt that kind of style of play from Tyler was not going to fly here. Now, you fast forward through April and you have that on top of the team's poor play, and then eventually how they kind of sent down Jordan Walker and then completely mismanaged Wilson Contreras, and you have a perfect storm of badness 6 weeks into the season. And by that point, it was pretty clear the Cardinals just weren't going to be able to recover from that.
I mean, for Cub fans, that was obviously one of the big storylines because Yadier Molina tortured Cubs fans for years and couldn't wait for that guy to retire. Although, I don't know, did you see that picture of him in the Cubs out blue? Did you see how that looked?
I did. And, I guess his son plays for a Cubs themed team. But it was a little weird. And, no offense to Cubs blue. I think it was just the person. I was like, oh, I don't know how that's supposed to go.
Yeah, that was a little jarring. But, you lose not only Yadi, the player, and no one ever questions his catching ability, but more of the clubhouse leadership. And I wonder how difficult that transition was to not have a guy like Yadier Molina in the clubhouse.
It was huge. And that was a big reason why a lot of the Cardinals focus, John Mozeliak, the president of baseball operations, said all throughout the offseason, they're looking to add veteran leadership. And that can be taken as a negative mark on the guys like Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, and Contreras. But really, it was just, when you think about it, Goldschmidt and Arenado have to go out and produce every day for a team that's not producing, and then have to mentor a bunch of inexperienced players. And it's not like they're not willing to do that. They are. But that's a lot to ask of your stars, both who, Nolan especially, did not have good years in 2023. And Contreras is brand new to an organization and is still trying to figure things out on his own. So it was a really difficult position for the veterans to be in. Same for Adam Wainwright, who, one of the most respected people in the Cardinals clubhouse maybe ever, but also had, not the season that he wanted to end his career in 2023. So when the Cardinals got out and brought back Matt Carpenter, they bring in Brandon Crawford to help with Mason Wynn, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Sonny Gray. It's a completely different clubhouse this year. And I think that veteran leadership is going to play a big part in the overall cohesiveness of the clubhouse. I think that's really important for a team that's going to have to feel a lot of pressure to win, and to win early this year.
No, I'm going to be honest. Cub fans had a real hard time. We talked about Yadi and Cubby Blue seeing Wilson